I'd never been through a cancelled festival before. That's certainly something which.
I mean, you used to take scheduled years off.
Yeah,
but that's entirely
fallow
different.
years. I love.
Was it every 5 years, one off?
Every fifth year, you took a year off for fallow year at Glastonbury, and we all planned for that, and all the staff knew that, and all the contractors knew that, and all the freelancers knew that, and the agents who booked the bands knew that and would work around it. And the BBC would work around it. Everyone worked around it. We all knew. People used to say, well, "How could you afford it?" I said, "Well, I know it's coming, so I work out I've got a year off, so it's fine."
Yeah, so you haven't booked anything. There's no costs.
It was something we've always done, and I think most of the festival staff supported it, not least because of Michael being then a farmer, and his view was, "I want to rest the land."
That's quite important.
We all bought into it, and it was an interesting thing to do, and it seemed to work. But an enforced fallow year was something none of us had ever experienced. I'd certainly never been. I've been through cancelled events. I'd never been through a cancelled festival before.
That's quite well. It's a shame this wasn't already a year off. It would have made it a lot easier.
Yeah, it would have been.
When it was the next scheduled year off?
3 years' time.
Okay.
So,
funnily enough, that potentially could be the first year when you can actually go back.
I mean, we're being very, very careful at the moment about what we do, because when we first went into lockdown, I think everyone thought it'd be weeks.
Yeah, I think
no one had any idea. As time's gone on, we've learnt that decisions which are entirely beyond our control are made often on hardly any notice. I mean, we're in a bad position. The travel industry, for example, when not only the industry but travellers are given 24 hours notice to basically get out of someone or somewhere or be stuck, is something that I don't think many businesses could work around. And we've certainly now thought we just have to be calm and decide what we can do and what we can do safely. Where we'll be in March next year, which is the Prime Minister's sort of projected, this might be how long this partial, or dare I say another full lockdown goes for, takes us through to March next year, as I said. So it's something we have to think about very carefully.
Yeah. So have you been talking to people, like close colleagues, people in the industry, about how the situation is at the moment and like how bad could it get?
There was an online virtual conference, the International Festival Forum, which normally takes place in London, about 3 weeks ago in Camden. That went online this year, and it was fascinating to listen to the different views. Also fascinating in a global business to listen to how different countries have reacted, and how some, in particular Southeast Asia, are basically coming out of full lockdown, or have come out of full lockdown, went into a sort of partial reopening, and now appear to be reopening because they pushed the rate of the virus down so much they can do that, whereas Europe and America clearly haven't. So, Mark Geiger, who was a senior agent, he left William Morris a couple of months ago, more than that. He said, if I was running a business, or if I could advise you, take 2020 off, and if you can, take 2021 off. Which is something no one wants to hear, and we live in a world now where people tend to ignore what they don't want to hear. But if you're sensible and prudent, and you're told that by someone who's very experienced and has no agenda, then you think, right, that's probably sensible
Sound
advice. So we're at Glastonbury, we're still looking at June 2021, because
when would you normally start announcing it?
We're lucky because we don't announce our acts, although we'd obviously had announced a lot of our acts, and the plan would be to rebook the 2020 bill.
Just move it a year back.
Yeah, we'll move everything, including our 50th anniversary celebrations, to 2021. The difference is, this year we knew we had to start building the festival in March, and again for 2021 we'll have to start building in March or the end of March, because it's a big festival and it takes a lot of build, and no one wants to do a light Glastonbury. It just wouldn't work in my opinion. So yes, I've talked to colleagues. I work with a lot of European festivals, and one of the difficulties has been that I see everything from my bubble in the United Kingdom, and the way the French government, the Spanish government, the German government, the Swiss government, and indeed not just the government, sometimes local states and areas with their own controls, like the cantons in Switzerland, you're looking at such different approaches. Serbia almost reopened, and we're going to run. Exit Festival was told you can go ahead, and they were going to go, which is one of the biggies, and they were going to go ahead until suddenly the corona rate spiked again in Serbia, and everything was pushed back again. Do you remember that Djokovic held a tennis tournament?
Yeah.
When 4 of the players tested positive, and a huge amount of the crowd were watching, obviously, were getting positive tests. So you've got to be aware of that, and you've got to be sensible and try and plan against that. But international touring is so complex. So our headliners would not just be coming for Glastonbury. It's rare, even though we think, we're big, and we are big. And, it's a very respected, it's iconic, really. And some artists occasionally do come over just to do Glastonbury, not least because of the media exposure and the TV. Most artists, most international, headline artists in particular, they might come and they'll be doing Europe. So they'll be doing the United Kingdom as part of Europe. They might do Glastonbury, they might do Rock Werchter, they might do Roskilde, they might do Lollapalooza. They might also be doing sort of, arena dates in France, a couple of stadiums in Germany. They might be going down to Greece and going to Spain and Italy, and that might be 2, 3 months, 4 months of work. It'll be planned a year, 2 years in advance. When you then start factoring in travel restrictions, the potential of local lockdowns, cancellations, what looked like a viable tour, even against the backdrop of, restrictions coming in, could suddenly become completely unviable because 2 out of your 15 countries in effect pull out, or you can't get there, or if you do get there, you've then got to stay there for an extra 14 days, which means the next 2 countries on your list you won't be getting to either, so you'll be cancelling them. All of a sudden, what looked like, on paper at least, a sensible tour, a prudent tour, becomes something which is unworkable, leaving, I wish, thousands of fans, I don't wish they were disappointed, but fans, disappointed, businesses having incurred huge costs, and potential ruin. I mean, it's been bad anyway. We all know.
But Glastonbury be all right, won't it?
You're like everything else. We're not immune. I mean, no one's immune to what's going on at the moment. It's unusual. I mean, I think we all wish we had something to go back to and say, right, well, we know what roughly will happen, and no one's got that information. No one at all. I mean, I think one of the most interesting things for me, because I'm a lawyer, was I didn't realise it at the time, but the insurance market withdrew communicable disease cover in January. In January,
wow.
I had never heard of the coronavirus. I might have heard of Wuhan, vaguely on the news, and you think, right, so the underwriters and the people who do that analysis for them had worked out there might be a problem. So they stopped offering cancellation insurance for anything to do with the coronavirus.
Because doesn't that come under force majeure?
It does.
Which I'd never heard of until this.
I said, as a lawyer, it's interesting. I do talk about force majeure, but never have I talked about force majeure as much. But force majeure it's a legal construct. It's not actually a thing. So you have contracts with a force majeure clause in them, which says if the concert is cancelled or the festival is cancelled for force majeure, this will happen.
So for anyone who doesn't know, how would you describe what force majeure is?
It's an intervening act beyond the control of any party. So for perhaps a flood or your venue burns down and it's not your fault. Tsunami, pandemic, and obviously pandemic being the one we're looking at now. So it's an intervening factor that means an event or whatever you're doing can't go ahead. So, for example, in the record industry, it used to be if the pressing plant burns down, the record label will be allowed to delay the release of a vinyl record or a CD that needs to be pressed for 6 months until they find another supplier. And they're not in breach of contract for doing that. And both parties step away, say, right, well, we need to have a reasonable solution, and that would have been built into the contract. And with that reasonable solution, the parties knew how to deal with it going forwards. I think because we're an event, we were worried about artists perhaps saying, we need to sue you for cancelling. It didn't happen, by the way, and I could say that across the industry. Almost everyone behaved remarkably well and was sensible. But it left everyone in the industry, the live industry, everyone in trouble. And I feel so sorry for particularly people on the production side, so freelancers in particular, crew, musicians, session musicians who have had no work and no support.
It just stopped.
Just
like
stopped
that.
like that.
Yeah.
And I have seen statistics. I think a third of all professional musicians are thinking or are thinking of leaving the industry and going doing something else. What else? I don't know.